Kawhi Leonard is the epitome of what an NBA superstar should be. He can score and defend at a high level, he can play-make at a high level, he can rebound at a high level, and he can also hit the most important shots of the game, no matter what the stage is. His track record as a two-time NBA champion and two-time Finals MVP backs up his Hall of Fame skill set despite a less than flattering track record over the past 6 seasons. Even still, Leonard showed great skill as the top option in playoff runs with the most cursed franchise in the NBA, and he was the only reason the Clippers were even close to playoff contention this past season. You could even argue that Kawhi was one of the 5 best players in the Clippers franchise history, and you'd probably be right despite Leonard playing only 7 seasons, and 4 mostly healthy ones, in LA. But his time with the Clippers organization is now over, and after cementing himself as one of the 10 best players in the NBA once again, he wants to compete for a title. So where else does he go than the place where he won his last championship, the Toronto Raptors? Now, I haven't made this very apparent in my time online, but I am a pretty die-hard Toronto Raptors fan, and have been for over a decade now. I've been through the lowest of the lows of the mid-2010s, where DeMar DeRozan was aptly titled DeMar DeFrozen for his subpar playoff performances. I was there during the quote-unquote LeBronto era, where the Raptors fell short to the Cavaliers for 3 consecutive years in the playoffs, including an absolutely devastating 2018 sweep, where the Raptors were the first seed in the Eastern Conference, yet couldn't take a game from the 4th-seeded Cavaliers, who were just in a 7-game battle with the 5th-seeded Pacers. I was there for the highest of the highs of the 2019 championship. I remember waking up after sleeping on an air mattress at my grandparents' house to the news that my favorite player growing up, DeMar DeRozan, was traded for Kawhi Leonard, who played only 9 games the previous season and made it clear that he wanted to play his last season in contract in Los Angeles, not Toronto. Still, Kawhi gave the Raptors his all, opening up the floor for Pascal Siakam to break out as a great number 2 option, along with maximizing the veterans Toronto acquired because they knew the team they built was special. And while there were bumps along the way, Kawhi carried a team whose playoff failures used to define them to an NBA championship. I remember watching Game 6, the closeout game of the 2019 NBA Finals, in my mom's bedroom, staring inches away at her small little 20-inch television set and thinking, I can't believe this is real. I remember the euphoria from the Toronto crowd at the championship parade as everyone was begging Kawhi to stay, just to re-sign with the team and city that would accept him for the rest of his career. But ultimately he chose to sign with the Clippers, and he did what he said he was going to do. He wanted to go to LA before he got to Toronto, and in the end, he got there. Since then, being a Raptors fan has been an up and down experience, to say the least. The 2020 season was surprisingly great, as a team who lost their leader quickly adjusted thanks to the improved play of Pascal Siakam, Fred VanVleet, Norman Powell, and OG Anunoby. That, alongside the veteran play of Kyle Lowry, Serge Ibaka, and Marc Gasol, led the Raptors to the 2nd seed, though their playoff run was stopped short in the 2nd round by the Celtics. The 2021 season was not so great, highlighted by the Raptors finding a temporary home in Tampa, and Siakam and VanVleet continuing to struggle following a combined subpar 2020 playoffs. Since then, the Raptors have managed to make the playoffs twice, thanks to new franchise star Scottie Barnes, whose efforts this past season as arguably the best defender in the NBA not named Victor Wembanyama brought the Raptors to their first winning season since 2022. Now the Raptors are sitting at a crossroads with a team good enough to make the playoffs, but not good enough to compete for an NBA title. There's certainly young pieces on this team that have the potential to be a part of a championship-level team, with, of course, Barnes leading the charge, along with former lottery pick Collin Murray-Boyles and swingman Jacoby Walter. The Raptors are very close to competing. Their current roster pushed a more talented Cavs team to a 7-game series, despite not having Emmanuel Quickley for the entire series, and Brandon Ingram for the better part of 3 games. What Toronto needs is a hero, someone with playoff experience who can take a team right on the cusp of greatness to an NBA title. Enter Kawhi Leonard. Again. Now, the circumstances of this ordeal will be completely different this time. In my opinion, this is Scottie Barnes' team no matter who walks in the front door. Of course, Kawhi will likely take over as the number 1 option from a scoring perspective, but this would be the first time in over a decade where it's clear that he's not the guy on a team. I think that might be best for Kawhi though, who doesn't need the entire load of a franchise on his back at 35 years old. Instead, you can treat him similarly to how you did the first time. Kawhi played 60 games in 2019, and he still led the Raptors to an NBA title. So why can't he play 60 or 65 games this season and take strategic rest at grueling points of the season. Meanwhile, you trust the core that you built to lead you to a couple of wins while your quote-unquote superstar isn't there. It's also clear that the Raptors core in 2026 isn't even close to the level as it was in 2019. Back then, you had young emerging stars who you could lean on when Kawhi wasn't on his A-game. Pascal Siakam. You had Fred VanVleet, Norman Powell, OG Anunoby. You also had better vets. Serge Ibaka, Danny Green, Marc Gasol, guys who you could lean on who could help lead the young guys in the right direction when things weren't always going great. The 2026 core just isn't really on the level of the 2019 core at this point. Your young guys like Jacoby Walter, Collin Murray-Boyles, and new first-round pick Allen Graves are good and project to be good, don't get me wrong, but they don't necessarily have the offensive ceiling that guys like Pascal Siakam and Fred VanVleet had at this point in time. When you acquire a guy like Kawhi Leonard, you're essentially saying that you're going to be going all in, considering that you give up a good talent like Brandon Ingram, you give up a young piece like Grady Dick, though he wasn't necessarily working out in Toronto, and you give up future draft capital. That's just something that you don't part ways with for no reason. And Kawhi Leonard at this point in time is looking to win an NBA championship. He came to the Raptors for that reason. Now he needs young guys that will help lead the way, and he also needs the older vets to help hold down the fort when the young guys don't necessarily have it on any given night. Back in 2019, you had Serge Ibaka, you had Marc Gasol, you had Kyle Lowry. Those were three steady options who have playoff experience, at the bare minimum had been to a conference finals. In 2026, your vets are shaping up to be Jakob Poeltl, who's a very average center, don't get me wrong, but certainly has his injury concerns and, as we saw in these last playoffs, isn't necessarily playable in the big moments. You're also going to have two guys who I would still consider young pieces, but are going to have to be the vets in this situation, Emmanuel Quickley and RJ Barrett. Both of those guys were drafted in 2019 and 2020, but they're going to be thrust into the vet roles because the rest of the core around the Raptors is still pretty young at this point. The combined playoff experience from those three guys essentially comes from last season, though Emmanuel Quickley didn't play at all in the series. Jakob Poeltl was benched for Collin Murray-Boyles half the time, and RJ Barrett hit a great shot at the end of Game 6, don't get me wrong, but also had his fair share of struggles from beyond the arc throughout the series. I'm sure Kawhi already knows this, but this is not the same Raptors team that he walked into 7 years ago. Of course, the roster and the makeup of the roster is completely different, but how we're getting these players on the roster has completely shifted and has been, to be quite honest, iffy over the past couple of seasons. In 2026, the Raptors have a couple of true needs on roster, one being the lack of a true playmaking threat on offense, the other being the lack of a scoring threat off the bench, and the third and most important one being that we don't have a reliable player over 6'10" on roster. But again, these aren't like days of old where the Raptors are going to be coming in and swooping up and fixing these problems. This is a problem that existed all of last season, and the Raptors' big trade acquisition was Trayce Jackson-Davis, who might be a good player maybe in the future if he can learn the system, but ultimately didn't find any playing time last season. This trade could absolutely backfire on the Raptors. While I wasn't necessarily the biggest fan of Brandon Ingram, his reliability in the regular season was one of the reasons why the Raptors were the 5th seed in the Eastern Conference in the first place. And if the Raptors find themselves without Kawhi Leonard for an extended period of time, their offense is going to be absolutely dreadful. And that's going to be very concerning and very hard to win basketball games if your number one option is just completely non-existent and you gave up a reliable scoring option for him. There's a reason why Kawhi Leonard didn't go for more in the trade market, and it's because teams are scared of his injuries. They don't want to be completely screwed out of a first-round draft pick and of decent assets if Kawhi Leonard isn't going to be healthy for them. There's a lot of different ways I could look at this trade, so let me separate it into two ways, from an unbiased perspective and from a biased Toronto Raptors fan perspective. From an unbiased perspective, this trade is an absolute win for the Raptors. They get a quote-unquote superstar level player. They get a top 10 player in the world who was All-NBA second team last season, who was healthy last season, who took a team who is not good at all and almost made them a playoff team. Now you're taking a playoff team and you are going to be the number one guy and you're going to raise them higher. At least from my perspective, Kawhi Leonard still has that ability, even at 35 years old, to lead a team to greatness. Can he lead the Raptors team to greatness? I don't know, that's TBD, and that's depending on if the front office can make the changes that need to be made. But Kawhi Leonard, I believe, at 35 years old, still has the ability to be a guy on a championship level team. You're also not giving up too much long-term value. Brandon Ingram is a good player in the present day, but in the future, is he going to be a long-term building block that you build around? Probably not. Same goes for Grady Dick, and the draft capital If Kawhi Leonard's great for your team and you guys compete for a title, that draft pick does not matter, as we saw in 2019. When you're a good, not great team in the NBA and you have the opportunity to acquire one of the 10 best players in the world right now, you 100 out of 100 times take that opportunity, especially considering that you don't give up anything of long-term value. Now, from a biased Toronto Raptors fan perspective, this just feels right. This feels like Kawhi is making up for the mistake that he made in 2019. As I mentioned earlier, the 2020 team was still very good without Kawhi. That was a second seed in the Eastern Conference, and they pushed a good Celtics team to 7 games, despite subpar performances from their supporting cast. When you think about it, if Kawhi Leonard was on that 2020 team, I'm not saying they'd be NBA champions because I don't want to live in a world of hypotheticals, but that team at bare minimum is the best team in the Eastern Conference and absolutely contends for an NBA title. But of course, Kawhi Leonard didn't choose the Raptors in free agency, instead went to the Clippers. They blew a 3-1 lead in the 2020 bubble. They lost in the 2021 playoffs, unfortunately because Kawhi Leonard got hurt, and since then they haven't had a playoff run near that level. This feels like Kawhi Leonard's apology to the city of Toronto. It's him admitting, hey, you know what? I shouldn't have gone to Los Angeles in 2019. I shouldn't have left the Raptors championship core. I'm back. Will you accept me? And the city of Toronto, the Raptors fans, I'm speaking for all Raptors fans in the city of Toronto, they absolutely say yes. We want Kawhi Leonard back on the team because we think we have a good roster where it stands right now, and we think Kawhi Leonard can be the piece that takes us over the hump. And on a personal note, this just feels like justice for 14-year-old me. I remember sitting in the car listening to Sirius XM radio when I was 14 years old in the passenger seat. I remember listening to Kawhi Leonard talk. Will he go to the Clippers? Will he leave the Toronto Raptors? All of this drama that surrounded this one signing. I remember it so vividly. This feels like justice for 14-year-old me. This is perfect. Kawhi Leonard to the Raptors, absolutely the move to make. I love it. Please take us to the NBA title, Kawhi. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like on the video, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more NBA videos just like this one, and leave a comment down below on your thoughts on this Kawhi Leonard trade. Did the Raptors give up too much future draft capital? Maybe they did. From an unbiased perspective, they probably did. From a biased perspective, I love it. Get Kawhi Leonard back in Toronto, please, and thank you. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe. I'll see you next time. Peace.